Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Progressive Patriots podcast. My apologies. This is pretty dated. Well, at the speed that things are moving these days, it's dated, even though it was only a few days ago. Regardless, I do have some other things that I'll be cutting in, so they'll be from Tasha because she couldn't join us when we recorded, so that'll be kind of fun. All right, here we go.
Like in the military, you think of a leader, or at least I'll speak for myself. I think of a leader as being the person who says, the buck stops here. And I am the person who, will make the hard call and do the difficult right thing over the easy wrong thing, and take the flak for it if things don't go well. Whereas with the Republicans, it seems more like, their job isn't even to draw a fire. It's just to, be the deflector in chief and stoke whatever, just like the insubstantial culture war talking point of the day is. Their job is to find a creative new way, or really to surround themselves with, consultants and focus groups to tell them what the most compelling and inflammatory way to blame other people for their problems are in a given week.
Yeah.
Which is fucked up. Like they're at the height of leadership in our government, and the overwhelming majority of their time and energy gets spent doing things that are run completely opposite to the way that I was trained a leader is supposed to conduct themselves as somebody who is a selfless servant to the people that are under them.
Do you all know JJ did tie buckle?
Of course.
Yeah, that's what a leader is, right? And I think maybe if they took that acronym to heart.
So this sounds like a Marine thing. So I was Army. I don't know what this is.
Yeah,
I think I've heard it before, but
14 leadership traits. That's it. Just different 14 particular things that you should try to embody as a leader. Justice, judgment, dependability. I don't remember all the rest of them.
Integrity, decisiveness, tact, initiative, endurance, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, enthusiasm. I should say I do remember that by heart for the most part, but I do have it up as well, so I'm like half cheating.
I usually keep it around.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic, I had them at my desk.
Are we recording? Oh,
it could be.
Yeah, I'm good whenever. So it sounded like we already were.
No, we were. Derek was just riffing, but it was good.
Yeah, it was good stuff. Should have had that rolling.
So it's difficult to know how to start this because of the situation. Derek, you and I were talking about this just before Bryson came on. The situation in Gaza is escalating. It's getting worse and worse by the minute. It's pretty much a complete information blackout there. There's no communications going out, as far as I know. I have seen that there has been a lot of international calls to Israel to show some restraint. At least let us tend to the civilians who have nothing to do with this. And Israel pretty much told them to eat shit. We're going to do what we want.
Yeah.
So as much as I don't know how to bring levity to a situation like that. I don't even think that you can.
I mean, I don't think it would be particularly desirable to.
Yeah, no,
there's enough fucking edgelords out there on the right. Like, I don't think it's particularly compelling or cute.
No, it's not funny. There's nothing funny about this.
Yeah.
As much as I try to be an eternal optimist, always trying to see the silver lining of things, I don't see any here.
No.
So, with that very somber note, we're going to keep our focus today on U.S. domestic issues. I deliberately kept Israel-Palestine news as out of this as much as I could.
Yeah.
That's a topic that deserves more attention, undivided attention. So let's get into American news. To begin, this is the Progressive Patriots. My name is Leo. You might know me from other Lux Media shows. I'm joined today by Derek and Bryson, who graciously gave up their Friday evenings to join me here. Oh my goodness. We are recording. It is presently just after 1800 Arizona time on Friday, October 27th. So, like I said, things are escalating really quickly. Things are moving really quickly. I know the first thing that we're going to be talking about is the Speaker of the House, the new Speaker, Mike Johnson. He has made it clear that he is going to be moving he has an aggressive schedule laid out to try and get things going in light of all of the crises that we're having at the moment. So there was a bunch of shit that happened with votes for Jim Jordan. He had like 3 votes. It got worse and worse for him every time. So like, fucking rest in piss. I don't care. Mike Johnson. I had found a lot of interesting things about this guy. He's a Republican, no kidding, out of Louisiana. He was a freedom lawyer, a religious freedom lawyer. I have freedom here in quotations because it wasn't anything about freedom. It's taking freedom from other people. There was a same-sex marriage ban in Louisiana that he defended. He also argued it to the level of the Supreme Court twice. So, in his words, I am a Christian, a husband, a father, a lifelong conservative, constitutional law attorney, and small business owner in that order.
Wow, that is quite the order.
Yeah, it's quite a list of things. I mean,
I would have at least put husband over Christian. That's just me.
I would have probably put father over everything.
Oh yeah, I guess that's
a father / husband. Like, I'm a family man. That's
yeah.
If I was him, I probably would have put something like neo-fascist, probably tucked in there somewhere too.
Oh, you know, neo-fascist. Is that like a theocratic fascism? Is that what it is?
I mean, it's 100%. It's 100% the guy's agenda.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
I mean, it really feels kind of like we're just playing a cup game where, like, underneath each cup, it's just another progressively shittier fascist, and really, like, I struggle to even like take any kind of solace in this clown taking over the speakership over, say, Jim Jordan.
Yeah,
because it's become just abundantly clear to me that the House GOP's strategy it makes it completely irrelevant who the speaker is. It actually makes it irrelevant whether or not they even have a speaker, because the whole name of the game at this point is to prevent the function of the republic. They don't want the government to work. They run on not wanting the government to work. For the few moments out of their term that they do have the government working, their primary order of business is to force government shutdowns and to just try and make things as painful for working class Americans as they possibly can. It's their entire policy package rolled into one. They don't have to pass any laws to be destructive. They know that. So that's exactly what they're doing. So if they can waste time in the pageantry of a speaker vote or 13 speaker votes for the same guy, then they're going to, because for them, the name of the game is run down the clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they don't hesitate to take credit for things that the crooked, immoral left does, like infrastructure projects, for example, that happened under Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. So he made it a point that at the construction site or the work sites for all of them, it says this project is brought to you by Joe Biden and the infrastructure infrastructure plan and the Inflation Reduction Act. Can't have Marjorie Taylor Greene standing in front of some ribbon cutting, pretending like she did something.
As much as I like that, I feel like it's kind of a baller move, him putting his name on those things. But at the same time, I think we got to recognize that it wasn't just the president that.
Of course not.
Made that. Yeah. I mean, there's so many people. I mean, even within common defense, there were people that contributed to that kind of thing.
Let's move down a little bit more of Mr. Johnson's accolades here. I'm not entirely certain what the legal significance of this phrase is, but it came up quite a few times that he signed an amicus brief. That happened. He did that a couple times, but in this,
Yeah. So I can speak to that a little bit.
Okay.
An amicus brief, and now everybody knows attorneys love Latin. Amicus basically means
Yeah, they do.
basically means like friendly or friend. It's basically somebody submitting their opinion on an item before the court as a friend of the court, and typically they will do some of the footwork or some of the research or present their proposal for how they think that a court ought to decide in a given matter. And you don't have to be an attorney to present one. Any of you could be amica curiae for any particular matter. Now, there are procedures and everything that go into that.
Into submitting it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to go through all the due process and procedures and have the forms correct and have somebody
The
actually
bureaucracy of it.
Sure, yeah, and the things that apply to that are similar to pretty much any court proceeding.
Yeah.
Like you have to certify that to the best of your knowledge, everything that you're submitting to the court is true and factual. And if it's found that you submit any of that with any kind of malintent or in bad faith, knowing that it was not accurate, then it can result in some punishments. Typically, those are reserved for the attorney that's kind of co-signing on it. So it's incumbent upon the attorney
To review it first.
Yeah, to review it and make sure. And as this kind of relates to the many cases that were submitted following the 2020 election, many of which were thrown out. A lot of these attorneys, like Rudy Giuliani, for example, that did actually get punished by their or had various types of sanctions from their local or from their state bar associations. Those are the ones who are responsible for ensuring like the ethics of
lawyer
attorneys.
licensing.
Yeah, it's attorney licensing conducted on a state-by-state basis. It takes a lot for you to get disbarred from because when somebody submits a bar complaint against you, there's a whole host of different things that a judge can do when reviewing that when they find wrongdoing. Typically, they're going to require like remedial training, essentially. If you do things that are unethical, they can, and much more frequently than disbarment, they will actually order that an attorney who, acts unprofessionally or in bad faith, they will find them and have them make them actually like sit in on law school ethics classes, at the back of the class. Might as well have like a dunce cap on, telling them like, you got to go back to school,
driving
go back to law school, sit with all of these 1L
pre-law
attorneys in training, and remember what it means to be an attorney. And if it's, repeated and egregious failures of following civil or criminal procedure, then they might have to sit in on a CIPRO class. But yeah, typically there is not like any kind of strong weight to an amicus brief. There's often kind of like a political undertone to it. Especially if you're one of these like lawyer politicians, like your Ted Cruz's and your Jim Jordans and this clown Mike Johnson. That is a common way for them to kind of grandstand and really put their exactly, to really put their name out there and sort of like an opportunity for them to generate red meat again for this audience of a base that does not have legal literacy. Like, they don't know what the fuck an amicus brief is. Right. They just see, all right, my guy put his name on a thing that now has my state Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court's heading on it. That makes it seem legitimate. That makes it seem real.
Must be important.
That makes it seem, yeah, exactly.
So his amicus briefs that I mentioned that he said that he argued ending the marriage equality in the U.S. at the federal level. He argued it twice, 2004 and 2014. But at one point, I want to say 2004, he had tried to make it to criminalize it. So it's not just you can't get married, it's you can't be gay. Oh, so that's one of the great things that this man has done. Another amicus brief was to throw out Pennsylvania's 2020 election results. So just disenfranchise the entire state of Pennsylvania because I don't like the outcome. In 2022, he put out a bill to ban school. It's the Florida thing, like what do they call it? The don't say gay or whatever, where teachers aren't allowed to use gender affirming language for trans kids or to discuss sexuality in any way.
Yeah, these free speech cats are shockingly scared of words.
Yeah.
So surprising.
That's really fun.
Is that also banning like gender affirming language to hetero or cis children?
I bet you it doesn't.
Like, because I mean, if you're going to ban it for some people, you might as well just make it where you can't do any of it, right? But,
well, that's exactly the thing, right, Bryson? Like it's
banned for trans kids, not for straight kids or like cis hetero kids.
Yeah,
they get to be boys and girls, but like a trans kid can't be a girl or boy if that's what they feel they are, because he's an asshole. The Dobbs decision, that's when Roe v. Wade was overturned, right?
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
So
Dobbs is now the prevailing precedent.
Yes.
The law of the land, and Roe v. Wade no longer is. And basically what that does now is it says that
no federal protections.
There are essentially no presumed federal protections for, the providence of abortion care. And essentially it punted that decision to whatever the law of the land, be that a prevailing state Supreme Court decision or a state appellate court decision, or if the state happened to have a valid law on the books. Many states, because there had been so much time that passed since Roe v. Wade,
they had the trigger laws ready, right?
They either had trigger laws already ready to go in red states, or in some states that were blue, purple, or maybe just not as focused on that particular issue. Yeah. So that's something we have going on. I'm calling in from Arizona right now.
Yes.
So
we got that coming.
For us, we had this whole big debate actually have to get settled in court relatively quickly following the Dobbs decision, because there were conflicting laws that were on the books. Some of it went all the way back to our territorial time.
1864. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, pre-statehood. And then there were other ones that had come about the Ducey Republican trifecta legislature. And then at the same time, that took place after we elected a Democratic governor and a Democratic AG. So it was actually a really interesting showdown to see multiple different laws come into conflict with administrations that would be unwilling to, or at least be within their purview to decide whether or not they actually wanted to enforce those laws. And there are showdowns like that happening all over the country, which is part of the reason why it's so important to push for federal protection that is codified into law, which means Congress needs to pass. Yeah, they need to take all of the presumed law that we got from Roe v. Wade, just as a court decision, turn that into language that can be codified into federal code, and then pass that through both chambers of the legislature and Congress, and then get that passed by President Biden. That is the only thing to stop us from having to have this ping pong game of, whenever one court decides one way or one state passes its laws one way or another, and really bring the United States of America back into the modern era.
We talked about that on our first episode, where Idaho had a situation like this recently, where they had a complete abortion ban. The only exception was saving the mother's life, and that's where the federal court or the federal government sued Idaho because the federal emergency care kind of law. I don't remember the acronym, but doctors are required to do what they can to save someone's life. And so the U.S. argued that if terminating a pregnancy is what is required, then you have to do that. And Idaho appealed it, and the appeals panel said the law does not specify abortion, so it doesn't matter. That was their argument, that word is not in it, so who cares? Anyway, Mike Johnson referred to this Dobbs decision as a great and joyous occasion. He opposes aid to Ukraine, but not to Israel. He opposes divorce, no-fault divorces, and wants to make covenant marriage the thing. Cannabis is a gateway drug.
Hold on. What? Sorry. What's covenant marriage? What is this?
Oh my God, this is a really interesting topic. So this is like kind of on the farther right fringes of evangelical Christian
the
conservative
religious
policy.
nuts.
Yeah, this is so. The idea here, and you can look up and see Mike Johnson proselytizing about this at some length. He is a culture warrior of the variety, who basically, like, his whole Billy Mays song and dance is that the reason why there are problems in our country is because basically we have an immoral country, and really there is no reason for us to have policy solutions for anything. There's no reason for us to invest in things like infrastructure or healthcare or education or anything like that. Really, the reason why we have things like school shootings or something to that nature is has nothing to do with access to firearms, has nothing to do with poverty, has nothing to do with mental health care, has nothing to do with, all of these diseases of despair that are externalities of poverty. All of it comes back to, well, if the kid had two straight, white, blue-eyed parents,
if he had Jesus in
who
his
were taking
life,
them to church every Sunday, then they wouldn't have all these bad thoughts in their head, and they wouldn't go out and do these terrible things. It's extremely reductive, and is part of a larger war on women too. When we talk about getting rid of a no-fault marriage, basically what that means is if somebody wants to leave a marriage, then they need to win that case in court. And what ends up being the result of that, most of the people that are leaving marriages in cases of abuse, sexual assault, exploitation of their labor, autonomy of their body, overwhelmingly women. So, they can treat this as though it's a completely gender neutral policy, saying that it's really about protecting the institution of marriage. But this is the same type of argument that they have advanced for decades to try and exclude gay couples from being able to get into marriage, right? To exclude them from the tax benefits and from the legal benefits of being in a legally recognized union. The idea is to consolidate that power and make sure that it is only available for men, essentially, in that equation. So, yeah, really, really gross stuff. Very authoritarian, theocratic.
Jeez.
And it ends up really genuinely hurting people. Just adding that additional financial barrier to getting out of a marriage, takes away a lot of your rights. And in a lot of these states, I believe he hails from Louisiana,
yes,
which is one of the most backwards, regressive states, sad to say, in terms of policy. The end result is you have a lot of women who have no economic means to get out of these abusive relationships, and they don't have the means to fight it in court, and they don't have protections from state criminal and civil law to prevent them from being abused and exploited by their spouses. So, very sick shit.
And I'm sure that, like you said, this is keeping women who are stuck in domestic violence, abusive, possibly rape situations. They have to stay there because they can't leave. They don't have the money to leave. They don't have legal protection to leave. And this guy's also the type to want to not have, what they call them, red flag laws for firearm purchases. So if somebody who is is on the books as a domestic abuser, well, that's not going to be a preventative anymore from them getting a gun. And sorry, wife, you're just a woman, so who cares? You can die. It's fine.
I mean, it all comes back to a philosophy that does not see women as co-equal people.
Right.
And frankly, does not see people as co-equal, just as a baseline. The kind of the viral Mike Johnson quote that has been running rampant over the last few days is about him positing that every woman in this country owes to their country an able-bodied worker. You know, seriously.
Yeah, I remember.
No,
that.
this is like fucking Handmaid's Tale dystopian bullshit.
Yeah.
But this guy is a real person, and not only is he a real person, he's one
step removed from the presidency.
1 or 2 fucking octogenarian arteries close sometime over the course of the next year and a half, and this dude's in line for the presidency. Like, it's a big fucking deal.
Yeah. It is really Gilead type of stuff.
Yeah. No, it's completely beyond the pale. And like let's look at the language there. He's not talking about people. He's not talking about Americans. He's not talking about human beings with agency. He's saying workers. He's saying people as commodified units for the exploitation of capital owners.
So I know this is going to be the second time I've brought up Joseph Goebbels on this podcast.
It is.
I'm sure it won't be.
That is quite the phrase to have.
It's not going to be the last time.
Probably not.
And it's going to be the same speech that I bring up this time. He had his first speech as propaganda minister of Germany was called German Women. It was all about how men need to stay men, women need to stay women. But if I remember right, it talked about how these German women need to go produce children that can work in the country and go fight for their beliefs.
True Aryan children.
Yeah, it just blows my mind that, like, yeah, they're not Nazis, but they're playing out of the exact same playbook. The exact same. Like, literally, they're probably just going through each speech and be like, all right,
it's
well,
a fucking Mad Lib.
Yeah.
Well, that's right, because it's not actually about the political party. Like, there is not something unique to the color swatches and textures of Nazism that are really meaningfully distinctive from any other kind of fascist authoritarian exploitation. They are playing from the same book because they've got the same goals, and they're attempting to achieve them through the same means. They need people angry at one another. They need them poorly educated, and they need them desperate in order to do it. And if you look at the policy program of House Republicans, that matches up with it perfectly. They don't want a government that works. They want people to be pissed off, and they want people to be confused, and they want people to be at one another's throats, because those are the conditions that you need in order to keep people in a constant state of just kind of muddled, confused anger, asking for somebody to tell them who they can direct their anger at to make shit get better. And that's what they're really good at. They're really good at saying, if only we could focus all of our frustration on whatever this big bad of the day is, whatever this October surprise is, right before election. Usually it's scapegoated in the form of a minority group, whether it's an immigrant caravan this time, or if it's, trans people invading your bathrooms, or, name your boogeyman. Like, it's a different one every time, but really the cast isn't that big. They just keep them on rotation. They're not serious people. They're not actually trying to govern. They're not playing the same game that we are.
So let me just read this one part of the speech, right? So the first, best, and most suitable place for the woman is in the family, and her most glorious duty is to give children to her people and nation, children who can continue the line of generations and who can guarantee the immortality of the nation. So literally this dude is saying the exact same thing as Joseph Goebbels, like down to the T.
Yeah. That's a quote from Johnson himself, was during when Trump tried to do the Muslim ban from the shithole countries, as he put it. Mike Johnson said, "This is not an effort to ban any religion, but rather an effort to adequately protect our homeland."
Wow,
And what the fuck is our homeland?
Right.
Too? Like we are on occupied land right now.
Yes.
All of us. This is all occupied land.
Let's keep going here on Mike Johnson. Quick note: climate change denier, to the surprise of no one, but something that I found that was completely unrelated is that his biggest donor is the fossil fuel industry. It's completely unrelated.
God. Say it ain't so.
Yeah.
That can't be right, Leo.
No.
Go back and check the notes again.
I gotta double check myself on that.
I don't believe you.
I just got a bingo. Like it's.
So here's another fun one. Is he's an advocate for term limits on federal legislators, and his first quote when he first got elected: I pledge that as a member of Congress, I will co-sponsor and vote for the U.S. term limits amendment of 3 House terms. On a completely unrelated note, he's currently in his 4th term.
Which, again, like, if we're playing a game where, like, the goal is to run the country in the form of a representative democratic republic, that makes absolutely no fucking sense, right?
Right.
However, if we're playing a different game, and the goal is for none of this shit to work, and for money to have as much influence on policy outcomes or the lack thereof, then it actually makes perfect sense. Because on my own journey, there was a time where I was like, man, there should be term limits. Why do we have like the same people in power forever and ever? And there's some wisdom to that too, right? Like you see some of these people who are in power and appear to be doing the job. For Einstein, for example, the original Speaker of the House. No, but so the idea seems like facially rational. It's like the problem is we just have these politicians who are huge pieces of shit, and they stick around too long, and they don't fix stuff, and they're bought and sold. We don't want them, we don't need them. So in theory, if we just had term limits, then the churn would be high enough that eventually we would have a good representative body. That could be true if, and only if, we did not work within the confines of a system where unlimited campaign spending has a bigger outcome on what policy gets passed or what dies in committee or what doesn't even make it to committee. Than any kind of deliberative process, than any kind of public opinion, than any kind of public outcry about policy decisions. All this does in a system where money has that outsized of an effect, and has ever since the Citizen United decision, which effectively allowed that. All that does is just make it cheaper to buy legislators, because now the lobbyists and the industry and these like political wants to start their own ethno-state lunatics. Now, the cost of them getting across the finish line or getting in front of a legislator is a much cheaper campaign donation, because you don't have these VIP guys like, I don't know,
McConnell.
Yeah, rest in peace, Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah.
Or Mitch McConnell on the right. Like, those guys are problematic in their own way, but having these elder statesmen, these senior lawmakers who do collect more experience and do gather more of their own clout and alliances and promises and commitments and all of these backroom politicking type things that need to happen in order to build consensus, all of that goes out the wayside, because you effectively go into a state of eternal campaign season. And everybody's a freshman, everybody's a new face, and it just becomes a career stepping stone for these guys to go into the lobby, as many of them already do anyway.
Wouldn't the PACs, the super PACs who float these campaigns, couldn't they would become the actual legislators, because they're just going to roll through clones of whoever's going to do the dance they want them to do, who's going to sign the shit that they want them to sign. And here you go. Here's a shitload of money. Just do whatever the fuck we say, and you don't have to actually do anything. Yeah. You don't have to do it.
At the same time, just playing devil's advocate, because I'm not saying I disagree with a lot of what y'all are saying. With a higher turnover rate, wouldn't there be more of a chance that an actually ethical person gets through and is like, oh, wait a minute, look at what these people are doing? Like, I feel like that would be the only saving grace that one might rise up. Yeah. That's all I can think of. But.
I'm gonna cry when Bernie Sanders dies.
I only think that is possible downstream of a system where it's not so pay to play already to start.
Yeah.
I think term limits in a vacuum are useless. I think term limits in a system where, let's say we completely turned the campaign finance system on its head, let's say it all of a sudden becomes only a ballot collection game.
Public funding,
and that is
with
and
hard
that is the
limits.
only thing that you can raise funds for, is basically to get signatures, to get your name on the ballot to run for office. And then when you get to campaign season itself, campaigns are completely publicly funded, and they're only allowed to take place up to, let's say, 90 days before the election. So you can't run ads, you can't run fundraiser events, you can't take meetings with super PACs, you can't even have PACs, let's say. Get rid of that structure altogether. Completely start over from square one and say, okay, a congressional campaign costs $1 million. And if you can get enough signatures to get across the finish line for you to be the guy that makes it to the general election, you get $1 million to do it. You can only do it over the course of 3 months or 6 months or however long. The thing is, when you have a term that is 2 years long, and you have absolutely no limit on when campaign season starts, then you can have a 2-limit term and spend the entire 2 years just campaigning for the next term. Yeah. Your job becomes campaigning. And there's no time to legislate, and there's not really any incentive for you to try to legislate unless your party happens to hold the super majority of the body to which you happen to have been elected. Legislators right now have very, very little incentive to actually try and debate and legislate and do all of these things that Schoolhouse Rock teaches us Congress does. They have all of the incentive to drum up these culture war issues, go to speaking engagements, and try to raise as much money as they possibly can, because the only thing keeping them in office over anybody else is how much money they have in their coffers, and there's no limit to how much they can get. So, time being zero sum, the one thing that they can do to feel like they're actually doing something to help is raise money. And that's fucked up, because raising money doesn't actually fix anything. We don't hire them to raise money. We hire them to fix shit. In fact, we give them money in the hope that they will then go in and fix shit. Yeah. And then what they do with that money is they buy campaign ads so that they can raise more money. It's a fucking Ouroboros snake eating its own tail. Yeah.
Everything's fine. That's the meme that just keeps popping up for me.
The fire, I'm having a coffee. Yeah. Last thing on Mike Johnson. He has a nickname from Matt Gaetz. That's not the kind of person that I would want to be close enough to give me a nickname. He's called MAGA Mike. We are going to take a really quick break, and we're going to hear from Tasha, her thoughts on Mike Johnson. And then we'll come back to some more shenanigans in Congress.
The new House Speaker is Congressman Mike Johnson, a hard right-leaning legal warrior, Donald Trump ally, turned little-known legislator from the state of Louisiana. Johnson is a deeply religious man, a 51-year-old father of 4 who has been involved in electoral politics for less than 9 years. Has been in Washington for roughly 2. Johnson was part of Trump's inner circle. He traveled regularly with Donald Trump on Air Force One while he was president. Johnson drafted a way for GOP lawmakers to support President Donald Trump's belief that the 2020 election was stolen from him. Basically, Johnson argued that some states' governors took it upon themselves, rather than relying on state legislators, to change the balloting procedures because of the pandemic. His argument was that this was unconstitutional, and his logic was widely spread by Republican lawmakers. He considers himself to be a constitutional textualist, and as a member of the House Judiciary Committee, Johnson was one of Trump's fiercest defenders in his impeachment hearings, leading Trump to include him, Johnson, in his defense team for the Senate impeachment trials in which Trump was acquitted. Johnson was very eager to back the nomination for Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. She has been a friend of his ever since 1988. This is why it's important to rally and support the black vote. Johnson was elected in 2015 unopposed in a special election to the Louisiana House of Representatives, serving parts of 2 incomplete terms. And in 2016, he was elected in a runoff to represent Louisiana's 4th District in the United States House of Representatives. Johnson's 4th congressional district covers 750 precincts in 14 Louisiana parishes. This includes the city of Shreveport, Bossier City, Minden, Nacogdoches, and DeRuyter, parishes with a high black population. He's been easily reelected since he faces no opposition. As a lawyer for the Alliance Defense Fund, the precursor to the Alliance Defending Freedom, Johnson wrote editorials for his local newspaper that called homosexuality inherently unnatural. He stated, and I quote, "Your race, creed, and sex are what make you, while homosexuality and cross-dressing are things you do. This is a free country, but we don't give special permissions or protections for every person's bizarre choices." He is the least experienced Speaker of the House in 140 years, and the fourth nominee for the job after the ousting of Kevin McCarthy. Johnson and his wife appeared on ABC's Good Morning America to support Louisiana's newly passed marriage covenant law, which legally made it difficult for divorce to happen. Conservative Christians in the late 90s thought divorces had become too frequent under permissive procedures, and they sought to legally tighten those procedures, which is exactly what the marriage covenant law did. It would contractually bind newly married couples who agreed to seek counseling to be separated for a couple of years before the divorce being final. Louisiana was the first state to turn this proposal into law, and Johnson and his wife were amongst the first couples to marry under the covenant marriage rules. Now, throughout his career, he has authored several bills, many of which restrict abortion access. This included the Unborn Child Protection from Dismemberment Abortions Act and the Second Chance at Life Act, rewarding reverse medical abortions, and the Protection of Unborn Act. Attorney General Bobby Caldwell contracted Johnson specifically to defend the state's restrictive anti-abortion laws. In October, Johnson filed Stop the Sexualization of Children Act of 2022, which is co-sponsored by 32 other Republicans. The bill prohibits federal funding for any sexually oriented event or materials for children under the age of 10. Critics now call the measure the federal Don't Say Gay bill. He opposes the legalization of marijuana, even medical marijuana, having called it a gateway drug. In 2017, Johnson supported Trump's Muslim ban executive order, which restricted travel to the U.S. from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. He was among a vast majority of lawmakers who voted to discourage the state's law enforcement and government agencies from working with the Council on American Islamic Relations, a Muslim civil rights organization. He said the effort was aimed against people who believed in the Islamic faith, but he was simply about opposing terrorism. Johnson is a climate science skeptic, raking in more campaign money and cash in his congressional career from the oil and gas industry than any other industry, and he's repeatedly downplayed climate change. This is just a snapshot of the power this man has. As a vice chair of the majority Republican conference, Johnson is now the 5th highest-ranking GOP House leader. Johnson also gets a seat on the House Steering Committee, whose members choose the chairs and members of the various committees that schedule and vet legislative proposals. Johnson said, "The reason why I work so hard to be at leadership tables is because I want to help develop what the overall message is. If you're not at the leadership table, you pretty much have to be a team player and go along with it," he said. The reason why it's so important for Common Defense to get our message out is because Johnson's job as a vice chair is to amplify a unified Republican message. He presses members to give speeches, then helps them turn those speeches into a platform that can play on legal television news back home or in a newspaper's op-ed. Johnson laid out his worldview in a candid talk with Fox's Sean Hannity, which is rooted in Bible-based principles. As a hard right-leaning conservative lawyer, his career consists of fighting against gay rights and demonstrating opposition to all abortion rights, while vowing that he could change the House rules to make it harder to remove him as Speaker. I think people need to really understand what's happening here. Republicans have set the tone for what they're about to do next, should they win the House and the Senate and the presidential election come 2024. This is about to get ugly. There's a lot at stake here.
And we're back. Moving on, George Santos, really quickly. His
I like that LOL.
Yeah, because like, is that your real name? We don't even know. So they made the Republicans out of New York. They made a privileged motion, which, from what I read, means that they have to vote on it. It can't not be brought to the floor to expel George Santos. All of his cohorts, Desposito, La Lota, Molinaro, and Lawler, and others as well, but these four from New York were the ones that stood up for it. All Republicans, and in their joint statement was, George Santos is not fit to serve his constituents as a United States representative.
Oh, it's got chills.
Yeah. To which Mr. Santos, if that is his real name, his response on Twitter, I'm not calling it X, it was 3 points of clarification. 1, I have not cleared out my office. 2, I'm not resigning. 3, I'm entitled to due process and not a predetermined outcome as some are seeking. God bless. The God bless was fucking cheeky.
This dude like ran to be a meme. Like that's all he did. And again, like this comes back to a lot of the factors that we're talking about. Like, so playing devil's advocate to your devil's advocate, Bryson, in a system where there's less incumbency, right? There are fewer people who can have long-running tenure and have a strategic vision for their time in Congress beyond, let's say, 4 years or 6 years or however many terms that ends up being. It does spin the door a little bit faster. It does get people in and out a little bit more quickly. There is more churn, but with it being a position that's higher churn, it makes it more accessible and more appealing to people who are opportunists, and it makes it easier for people who are getting in on abject bullshit, frankly, to not get vetted. Because the thing about this clown is he got in, and he's very likely not going to win again. I mean, I haven't looked at like the Cook Political Index of his district in a little while. I haven't seen polling about how popular he is in his district. I would imagine he's probably not super popular, especially since he's a Republican in New York. He's probably already just generally not very popular. The type of Republican that gets elected in New York has a policy platform pretty similar to like a Democrat that gets elected in rural Arizona or rural Louisiana or what have you.
Yeah.
It happens and it's possible, but these are guys that run much more close to the middle of the track and really have to run on kind of like kitchen table issues with like very inoffensive unity language. Right. You don't typically get like iconoclast type figures that are
MTG.
Highly polarizing. And yeah, you know, MTG can run in her district as she runs
in perpetuity
because in perpetuity because she's actually a pretty good reflection of like the largest voting block of people in that district. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily not the case for Santos. You know, there's a lot about him that I don't know because most of what I have learned about him has apparently been fabricated. So yeah, I'm willing to hold out the possibility that there are electoral realities I'm not aware of in the Santos case. I would suspect, based on the rest of his Republican delegation in New York, kind of leaving him by the wayside. Again, these guys are mostly moderates for whatever passes for a moderate in the state of New York. Their main job is just to lick their finger and hold up their hand and see which way the wind is blowing, and then to follow that. They do not have any incentive to be courageous in their policy positions or their statements or the stuff that they will commit their staff's time to drafting up and then publicizing.
I think all of those guys have including Santos, they all have part of their district cuts into New York City. So that there's a contingent there that you have to appeal to, and it's a big group of people. And so, like you said, you have to have more unifying language, softer language, even ditch the culture war bullshit and just talk finances. Really, just pretty like running on like what, a social libertarian or something. I don't know what they call themselves, but like socially liberal.
I lived in upstate New York for a little bit, and there are certainly places where Republicans run and are very successful. And there's the two biggest issues that really like there are certain issues on the national stage that those Republicans really cannot touch in New York, like abortion access, for example.
Right.
That is a losing issue for them nationwide. It is also a losing issue for them, by the way. If you look at national polling, it is an unpopular position, probably because it dehumanizes half of the fucking population of the country.
The
Go
planet.
figure. Yeah. Well, yeah, the whole human race, sure. Crazy that it would be unpopular. It especially doesn't work in New York. There are a couple things that do work pretty well amongst the cultural conservative and economic conservative people in New York, and that is taxes are really high there, and it's very difficult for them to get their hands on firearms, and they focus on those two things, like economics and kind of like good old boy homegrown American conservatism,
Right.
which is that, you know, I want to be able to take my 30-06 out to the woods and go shoot something.
Just like God intended.
Yeah.
Sorry, George. I'm not sorry, George.
I don't see where George fits into either of those.
No, just because I wanted to put a cap on it and move along to Mr. Jamal Bowman out of New York. So he pled guilty to a misdemeanor. He pulled a false fire alarm. That's the charge that he got. His words were, "What I did was against DC law. As I said from the very beginning, I was not trying to disrupt any congressional proceedings. I got to take responsibility for it, which I'm here to do." So kudos for that, I guess, but come on, dog. We know you were trying to delay some shit.
Seemed pretty obvious, honestly.
Yeah, it was. It was really obvious from the beginning. But I mean, he took one for the team, if that's the case.
I just think it's hilarious how like the crime or the crimes some Democrats pull. Obviously, some of them are way worse, but the ones that really get focused on, got all these Republicans doing these crazy things, and then we got this guy that's like, "Yeah, I pulled a fire alarm." Like, all right,
Shucks.
not that bad.
Oops.
Yeah.
It is like, it's kind of jarring, like the parody with which a story about a Democrat pulling a fire alarm to try and avoid a government shutdown. And like, you can call it a stunt, you can call it unethical, immoral because it's against the law, or whatever the fuck. You can call it all those things. The amount of media attention that it's going to get is going to be on par with or less than, you know, let's say, I don't know,
Menendez?
Matt Gaetz, like having credible allegations of trafficking children across state lines to prostitute them. Like, the way that the media covers them is like, well, yeah, you know, this is just like the corner of the day where we talk about naughty things that members of Congress do, and there's no like actual accounting for like, some of these things are objectively a lot more fucked up than others. Like Jamal Bowman pulling a fire alarm because in his moral assessment of what the fuck he, as a member of the United States Congress, could do about the reality that a majority, the Republican majority of the United States Congress, is so politically cynical and vile that they're willing to let the government shut down, which results in schools going unfunded, results in food coming off of people's tables, results in disabled people not getting medical care. Like, we're talking about like people's life support being having the plug pulled out from under it.
Yeah, that's what I was
And
about to
like,
say.
yeah, and like we have to talk about but no.
But fucking nothing.
That was illegal. There was clearly a sign there that says no one shall step on Sergeant Major's grass, and there he is on the grass. So naughty, bad Jamal Bowman. See, Democrats also are trying to have a fucking coup.
The rest of the staff NCOs needed time to read the commander's brief, and they didn't have. They got like 5 minutes, and they needed more time. So I went to stand on Sergeant Major's grass. Somebody had to pull him away from the fucking table.
I'm just, I'm sure it comes across in my voice. I'm just so fucking sick and tired of the both sides
this
narrative.
Is nothing.
This is like both sides on crack. Like we literally have one side that has committed itself to fucking overthrowing the government while they're like in control of half of it. But we have to talk about it as though like, well, they're both not perfect, so they're both the same. And that's just not fucking true. It's not rational for one, but it also isn't like in line with, I don't know, hundreds of years of like common law in the West, that like some crimes are worse than others and deserve different punishments and different treatments, and and that like there are also things that in context, although would ordinarily be criminal, are not in fact criminal if they're done for very, very good reasons with extenuating circumstances. That's the whole reason why we have like trials by jury instead of just like a checkbox list,
right? Where
you can say, well, was he in fact wearing white after Labor Day? Well, okay, then the list it says, 50 lashes. Sorry, we got to do it, bud. Like, no, it's not rational, and it's not the way that I think any reasonable, serious person looks at the issue.
Nothing, Bryson? You look like you were about to say something.
Yeah. I think I'm spent on that one.
Yeah.
I don't got any more.
Speaking of being spent, Perry Johnson suspends his campaign for president.
Nice segue.
Rest in peace. We hardly knew you. I seriously didn't know who that was. I don't know why that was on Reuters, but it was.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Well, as we are wont to do here on the Progressive Patriots, we were having a little bit too much fun, and we ran a little bit too long. So I'm going to have to release this in 2 parts. But I do want to say thanks to Tasha. Thank you for sending in that very good monologue. I think monologue is the right word. Let's see. What do I gotta say? Because the shit's over. Network stuff is, if you like boxing, you can check out the Lux Media show called B-Sides Boxing. If you're into MMA, Ultimate F and Casual. If you just want to hear like a slice of life kind of thing, you can check out the show me and my cousin do. It's called Hard Shell Tacos. All of these things you can find on the website, lvxmedia.net. And there you'll see all the buttons for the different things that we're getting up to over here. The social media handles are lvxmedianet on everything. If you can't find me, I'm not on it. And Common Defense, I believe on Twitter is @Common Defense. On Instagram, Common_Defense. Another group that I like, Vets Forward, is Vets_FWD on Twitter. Vets FWD on Instagram. If you would like to get involved with either of these groups, you can go to lvx.at/CDEF. That's lvx.at/CDEF. That's for Common Defense. If you want to get involved with Vets Forward, this is a more Arizona thing, but lvx.at/VFWD. Yeah, you see what I did there? That's pretty good. Contact options. If you want to reach out, you can hit the website, hit the Progressive Patriots button. There are 2 options there. You can email us. There's the email button and the phone number. It's 833-589-7637. It's anonymous and unattended. I don't check it until we're about to record to see if I have anything. So the number, it's 833 Lux Pods. Do you see what I'm doing with this shit? I kind of have an idea of what I'm doing with this shit. But that's going to do it for this half of this episode. Again, my apologies for how long it took to get it out to you, but thank you for your patience, and thank you most of all for listening. If you could really do me a solid, it helps a lot if you rate and review the show on whatever platform you're on. Some platforms do it per episode, which I'm not going to ask you to go that far or that in depth if you don't want to. Also, interacting with social media posts. LVX MediaNet is where everything is. It really helps, and it helps me. I would love to get feedback from anybody. And we're also on YouTube, kind of. It's just like a repackaged audio format with some like generic colorful video. I don't know, the distributor does that, but still. I think that's gonna do it because I don't have anyone else to ask if they want to plug shit. All right, I'll see you on the next one.